Hello and welcome to Westferry Times. Today we're doing a deep dive into something pretty significant happening here in the UK. It's a legal challenge about British exports of F-35 fighter jet parts to Israel. This is obviously unfolding against the backdrop of the conflict in Gaza, and it raises some, well, really big questions about arms transfers, international law, and accountability. And to help us make sense of it all, we have Professor Daniel Kaye with us. He's an expert in international humanitarian law, arms trade regulations, and really knows the intersection of foreign policy, ethics, and the law inside out. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's definitely a complex issue worth unpacking.
Absolutely. So let's get straight to it. For listeners maybe just catching up, what is this legal challenge fundamentally about? What's the core aim?
Right. So at its heart, this challenge is a request for judicial review. It's been brought by Al-Haq, which is a Palestinian human rights organization, and they're essentially arguing that the UK government, by continuing to allow the export of components, specific parts that end up in Israeli F-35s, well, they argue that this violates both international law and the UK's own arms export rules, especially given the F-35's reported use in Gaza.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're talking about components, parts made here, not the UK selling whole F-35 jets directly to Israel.
That's exactly right. The UK is a partner nation in the big U.S.-led F-35 program. So British companies, like BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, they manufacture key components, things like parts of the fuselage, engine components. These parts are then exported and integrated into the final aircraft elsewhere. Al-Haq's point is that providing these vital parts enables the F-35's operations.
Got it. And the legal argument, you mentioned international law, is it mainly based on the Arms Trade Treaty?
Precisely. The UK is a signatory, fully bound by the Arms Trade Treaty. And a key part of that treaty, Article 6, I believe, prohibits arms transfers if there's what it calls a clear risk they could be used to commit or, accordingly, facilitate serious violations of international humanitarian law.
A clear risk. And Al-Haq believes that threshold has been met.
Yes, that's their central argument. They point to the scale of civilian casualties, the destruction of homes, hospitals, infrastructure in Gaza, and say, look, that clear risk is undeniable now.
That sounds like a high bar to meet legally, proving that clear risk. Has this kind of argument worked before in UK courts?
It is a high bar, certainly. But there is precedent. You might remember back in 2019, there was a successful legal challenge regarding UK arms sales to Saudi Arabia, focusing on their use in the conflict in Yemen. The Court of Appeal actually found the government hadn't properly assessed the risk of those arms being used in violation of international humanitarian law.
And that led to a temporary halt in sales, didn't it?
It did. It forced the government to reassess its processes, though sales eventually resumed after that reassessment.
So faced with this new challenge over F-35 parts, what's the UK government's position? What are they saying?
Well, the government's standard line is that the UK has one of the most rigorous and transparent arms export control systems in the world. They maintain that every single export license application is assessed individually, case by case, against strict criteria, including human rights considerations.
And specifically on the F-35 parts.
On the F-35 program, they tend to emphasize that it's a multilateral defense project with allies. And crucially, they argue the exported components aren't, quote, directly intended for use in any specific ongoing operation. They're supplied as part of a long-term program.
That phrase, not directly intended, that feels like a potential legal battleground, doesn't it? A bit of gray area.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's likely where a lot of the legal argument will focus. Critics would argue that even if not directly intended for Operation X tomorrow, if you know the likely context these jets will be used in involves potential IHL violations, does that knowledge override the not directly intended defense? It's about foreseeable use, essentially.
Right. Let's shift focus slightly to the context in Gaza itself. The F-35 is known as a very advanced aircraft. How has it actually been used in the recent conflict?
Yes, it's a fifth-generation stealth fighter, very capable, designed for precision strikes amongst other roles. And Israeli defense sources have confirmed quite openly that F-35s, or ADIR as they call them, have been actively used in the airstrikes over Gaza during the recent hostilities.
And those airstrikes have drawn significant international criticism, haven't they? Concerns about civilian casualties.
Yes, immense concern. We've seen reports from the UN, from numerous human rights groups, documenting widespread destruction and civilian deaths, leading to calls for investigations into potential war crimes by all parties.
So Al-Haq is drawing a direct line here, saying the UK parts enable these specific aircraft used in these specific controversial strikes, arguing a form of complicity.
Exactly that. The legal argument revolves around the idea that by providing essential technology for aircraft known to be used in operations causing such concern, the UK incurs a level of responsibility under international law, even if it's indirect.
So what happens next with the court case itself? What's the immediate step?
Okay, so the immediate hurdle is permission. The High Court needs to decide if Al-Haq's case even has enough merit, enough arguable grounds to proceed to a full hearing.
A sort of filtering stage.
Precisely. If the court grants permission, then we get a full judicial review. That would involve a much deeper examination of the government's decision-making process, the evidence it considered when granting these export licenses for the F-35 parts.
And how long might that take? Are we talking weeks, months?
Oh, realistically, months. These kinds of judicial reviews, especially involving sensitive foreign policy and defense issues, tend to take time. And of course, running parallel to this court process is the ongoing political debate.
Yes, let's talk about that. What's the reaction been like in Parliament and maybe more broadly?
We've certainly heard quite a bit from MPs. There have been calls, particularly from Labour and SNP MPs, but also some crossbench peers in the House of Lords,
Wow.
calling for much greater scrutiny and in some cases demanding an immediate suspension of arms exports to Israel pending a full investigation into the Gaza operations.
So growing pressure politically.
Definitely growing pressure from certain quarters. But public opinion, as you might expect, seems quite divided. You have strong voices calling for accountability and adherence to international law, but you also have concerns raised about the UK's relationship with Israel, strategic alliances, security cooperation, and the defense industry. It's complex.
It really underscores how arms export policy is never just about the law or economics, is it? It's deeply political.
Absolutely. It's a core instrument of foreign policy, reflecting alliances, strategic priorities, and, yes, economic interests too.
How does the UK's current stance compare with other major Western countries regarding arms to Israel? Is everyone on the same page?
Not really, no. It's quite a mixed picture. The U.S. obviously continues to be the largest supplier, though there's fierce debate within the U.S. about it. Germany, I believe, has also continued approving exports recently. But then you have countries like Spain and parts of Belgium that have explicitly moved to suspend certain arms exports to Israel, citing the situation in Gaza.
So the UK is somewhere in the middle, claiming due diligence but continuing exports.
That seems to be the position, yes. Maintaining the process is robust while allowing these specific F-35 component exports to continue under existing licenses.
This brings up a difficult point, maybe a distinction between moral concern and legal proof. Is it possible for something to feel morally wrong but not actually meet the legal tests for stopping arms exports?
That's a profound question, and yes, absolutely. International humanitarian law has very specific definitions and thresholds, proving a clear risk of serious violations, demonstrating intent or lack of proportionality in specific strikes to a legal standard that can be incredibly difficult. So there can definitely be a gap between a strong ethical or moral unease about contributing to a conflict with high civilian casualties and proving a definitive breach of the legal criteria as currently written.
The law sometimes lags behind our ethical intuitions, perhaps.
Or requires a type of proof that's very hard to obtain in the midst of conflict. Plus, there's always the challenge of balancing these legal and ethical concerns against national interests, alliances, economic factors. It's a constant tension in arms control.
Looking ahead then, if this case does get permission for a full judicial review, what could be the potential consequences?
Well, firstly, it could force the government to be much more transparent about its decision-making. They might have to disclose the specific risk assessments they undertook for these F-35 exports. Depending on what comes out, it could significantly increase the political pressure for suspending exports, or at least imposing much stricter conditions.
And maybe have wider implications.
Potentially, yes. It could reignite the broader debate about the UK's role in global arms supply chains, particularly regarding conflicts where human rights concerns are high. It might lead to calls to revisit the UK's own export criteria.
Fascinating. Well, this has been incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for breaking down such a complex legal and political situation for us.
My pleasure. It's vital these issues are discussed openly. Hopefully the legal process brings some clarity. Whatever the outcome, accountability is key.
Indeed. And thank you, our listener, for tuning in to this deep dive on Westferry Times. If you found this discussion thought-provoking, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Maybe leave a review. It helps others find the show.
Yes, staying informed on these matters really is crucial.
We'll be back soon with more analysis of the key stories shaping our world. Until then, from all of us here, Stay informed, stay curious, and stay engaged. Goodbye for now.